I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Let's talk about some articles that were in the news lately regarding the NDP government, the provincial government, the property transfer tax, and some things that were in the news along Twitter as well about some U.S. buyers, several cases of U.S. buyers who have owned real estate in downtown Vancouver as second or third homes for 10 and 15 years who are now forced to sell because they've been hit with this double whammy Vancouver empty homes tax and BC spec tax. So a couple of things I want to talk about first. Call this one kind of a action reaction. For every action, there's going to be a reaction, and I've talked about this several times here, and I've been setting the table here for the ugliness that's going to happen with our provincial budget coming up in 2020. So, I just kind of shake my head. And again, I want to put something out here. I don't want to get political here. As I've always said on my blog here, all political parties are the same. They're not your friend. Do everything you can to distance yourself from any reliance on the government, whether that's the Liberals, the Progressives, the NDP, or the Greens. Pay your taxes, work hard, get better at your career, invest your money so it pays you, and go about your business. Governments come and go. But I've talked about several times here, and this has been in the newspaper, and I've been following a few developers on Twitter here who have brought up some very strong points here. The current state of the Vancouver real estate market is this, and this is the straight up truth here. The NDP, of course, with the BC speculation tax and the school tax, the foreign buyers tax isn't doing anything. They don't even talk about that anymore. Nobody's buying properties and triggering the foreign buyers tax, and they never did. But the other big thing, of course, too, is just the uncertainty with this current government. What's the next shoe to drop? What are they going to do here? They're raising taxes, payroll taxes, raising the minimum wage. It's not a good business environment to be in. But you see John Horgan and my favorite finance minister, touting how strong the BC economy is. And they're not giving you the full story here. The BC economy, when they inherited it 2 years ago from the previous government, was the strongest in Canada. And it's still holding up okay, but it's showing signs of losing steam. And this type of thing takes 2.5 years, a couple of years under the current government before we're going to see the results of how things are working out here. So it's apparently running on fumes now. And one of the big reasons is because they have drastically slowed the sales volume. They haven't done anything to prices, as I'm going to talk about here. At least not in the bulk of the market, which is the condo market. They've done some damage to the luxury detached and luxury condo market, but nobody cares about that. That's not going to move the needle on affordability for the average guy who wants to buy a home or see his rent prices go down. But what they have done is slowed the market by about 30 or 35%. Thus, that is going to bring down the property transfer tax revenues by 30 or 35%. Now, if I pointed out here many times, real estate owns this province. Real estate runs this province. It punches way above its weight class. It's already a heavyweight, but it punches as a super heavyweight. And that is the cold hard truth on that. Property transfer tax runs this province. It's the biggest tax grab we have. I've done many blogs on the property transfer tax. Complete tax grab. They have never adjusted the property transfer tax in over 30 years. When it was first introduced, go back and watch my blogs on it, it was put in as a wealth tax, and it was only triggered by about 1 or 2% of the properties. That's back when you could buy a Kitsilano detached home for $220,000. Now that Kitsilano detached home is $2.5 million, but yet the property transfer tax has never been adjusted. So that revenue that's created by the property transfer tax runs this entire province. Now that the NDP have cooled the market, we're going to see that the results of this in next year's budget in 2020. NDP is spending like a drunken sailor, like they like to do, but the revenues just aren't coming in. And that won't be realized for another year, not until 2020. Right now, they're still riding on the fumes of the previous government and the booming economy they inherited. We'll see where this goes, but as they're pointing out, many of these economists are saying, we got a problem. But the crazy thing is they've slowed the market, but they haven't done anything for affordability. As I've blogged about, condos, which make up 90% of this market, is really all most people are interested in. Studios, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedroom condos priced under $1 million. Those prices are barely off. As a matter of fact, the good quality 1-bedroom units in downtown Vancouver are off maybe 5% at most. So it's taken it from 680 down to 670 or 665. Barely touched it. The only thing that this speculation tax has done, and all the uncertainty and all the tax increases and the payroll taxes and everything else has done, is cooled the high-end market, the luxury market. And if you follow me on Twitter, I've posted several articles on this, how these guys are laughing. I mean, yeah, sure, you can now buy a $3 million house for 2.7. That's really going to help that first-time buyer who's trying to get in. So I'll give you a little sideline story here from the front lines here. You're going to like this one. Had a client earlier this year who didn't inherit a property, but was able to purchase a property through a family friend's estate. So it was not a transaction that was put on the MLS. So just for argument's sake here, it was a townhouse, and we'll put out here it was $700,000 is what it was transferred. He didn't get it for free. He had to pay $700,000 for the unit. It was done as a private sale, not through the MLS. Now, he bought this property at $700,000, which was a fairly good price. He didn't steal it. It was probably about market is what he paid for it, maybe a little less. Thought he was getting a little bit better deal because the intention was that he was going to live in it for a year or two and then fix it up a little bit and then sell it. So I don't want to drag this out too long, but the bottom line is that it turns out that there was some problems with the house, with this townhouse, some remediation work and some things that had to be done that had been done to this unit unbeknownst to him that were against the city of Vancouver. So he had to remediate some things, cost him about $20,000, and had to get permits and everything else to get on board with Strata. To make a long story short here, I ended up selling this property earlier this year, this past winter, for $780,000. But he also, as I say, had to put about $25,000 to get this house sellable. So it wasn't a good deal for him at all. Just barely broke even on it after my commissions and the holding costs and everything else. He called me last week and said, "Oh, and I got a letter from Revenue Canada, from province of British Columbia, saying they're auditing my PTT. And they are charging me an additional $2,500 in property transfer tax based on the fact that they thought that he got too good of a deal on this. $700,000 was well below market. That's what they said. And as proof, they showed him a comparable unit, what they said was comparable, in his complex that sold for $829,000. Now, it's crazy. This unit that sold for $829,000, was in a much better location in the complex. The one that my seller had backed onto a busy street, so it was not in the best location, a lot of noise from the backyard. This other one also pretty much had a full renovation done to it. Bathrooms had been upgraded, kitchen, flooring, far superior unit. So he's asking me now, what should I do? They can petition it. I told him, go talk to his lawyer, of course, the lawyer that did his conveyancing when he bought this. But I told him, he's probably got a pretty good case. That unit was a far superior unit. You just sold your unit for $780,000. Plus you had to put $25,000 in it to get sellable. So now we're down to $750,000. But it's up to you because it's a hassle. I don't know what it's going to take to petition this. Again, talk to your lawyer. But what I want to point out here, this is the NDP. This is how they roll. And, in some ways, though, you have to remember that when you do these private sales, which I'm not a big fan of, you are open to a lot more scrutiny on these, and you probably should be, because they think that in a lot of cases, they're inheriting these properties or they're within families and they're cutting a huge break on the price. So thus lowering the PTT, and the government wants their share. In this particular case with my client, that's not the case. The comp they're using is night and day. But hey, The NDP is desperate for income here, folks. Wait till next year's budget. They need to get this money any way they can. Now, it's up to my client. I'm suggesting talk to his lawyer, but he should probably fight this, or at least question this. And I think the value is more like maybe 740 on that townhouse. So maybe it'll reduce his PTT bill here, his additional PTT from 2,500. Maybe he'll end up paying 750, which is better than a kick in the head. So he probably should, but I don't know how long it's going to take and what kind of hassle he's going to have to go through to do it. Who wants to mess with the government and that kind of thing? But that's the story here. Now, just on a side note, I don't really recommend people doing private deals, and this is one of the reasons why. When you're not listing in the open market on the MLS, much more scrutiny, and you probably should, because I'm sure there are people that are abusing this, transferring these properties well below market value to save some property transfer tax. So it doesn't surprise me in a way. But in this particular case, talk about nickel and diming this guy. And the comp they're using is just ridiculous. Second thing I want to talk about that was all in the news here, following some of the guys, some of these developers on Twitter. Talked a story about, interviewed a realtor for downtown Vancouver who had just listed a $1.9 million Yaletown condo. Story was is that she had sold this to her sellers 12 years ago. They're from, I think, Portland, Oregon. Love coming up to Vancouver. Bought the property 12 years ago. Don't want to rent it out because they use it. They come up 4 or 5 times a year. They drive up. They let their family and friends and kids use the property as well. So it's used quite a bit. Love Vancouver. Love Yaletown. They sucked it up and paid the BC spec tax and the Vancouver empty homes tax. Because remember, if you own a property that's vacant in Vancouver, you've got double whammy here. So they paid the $30,000, $40,000 in vacant homes tax and spec tax. They ate it this year. But this year, they decided enough is enough. Before we have to pay it next year, we're going to sell it. So they just listed it at just under $1.9 million. Hate to do it, and it's left a bad taste in their mouth, which I don't can understand. So this is the action and reaction that the NDP government does not talk about here. So and the joke on Twitter was, so here you go. NDP's doing their job. They're going to have a $1.9 million condo here for sale. So anyone that's having a hard time getting into this market and struggling, there you go. If you've got a spare $2 million with PTT, you can get into this 3-bedroom, 2-bath Yaletown condo. It's not doing anything for who they said they wanted to help and who they should probably be helping. But what it's doing, here's the reaction. The reaction is that these people are going to sell the condo. They're not going to come up to Vancouver. They've said, we're going to take a break from Vancouver, but we probably will visit once or twice a year for a few days and stay in a hotel. But nowhere near the 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 150 days that them and their family were using this house on an annual basis. And all the money they were spending in the restaurants, all the money they were spending on skiing, all the money they were spending on entertainment, renting bikes, Shaw Cable, internet. I would estimate, they talked about this, maybe $50,000, $60,000 a year was being pumped into the economy from just this one seller that we're not going to see. For what? Selling a $2 million condo, somebody's going to buy it, but it's not going to help who we're supposed to be trying to help, people get into the starter level condos. Again, it hasn't done anything for that. This is making the situation worse, as these people were pointing out. We've cooled the market for sales. Nothing has been touched in the entry level as far as prices. We're going to have a huge PTT income deficit here, which the NDP's already spent, and they're not going to collect it next year. And what is getting sold are luxury high-end detached homes and luxury condos. And we're going to be losing, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 million dollars. I'm not sure how many of these people like this are selling. They're not the only ones. I'm sure there's been dozens of others that many of them probably sucked up the tax for the first year. Some didn't. but I think a lot did pay the tax, but now they're probably questioning it. So we'll probably see some fallout from that. But these are all going to be high-end units, folks. They're not one bedrooms. These type of people that own 2 and 3 homes, they're not coming up here and living in a studio. They're living in these $1.5 to $2.5 million condos. That's what the idea of buying a second home is all about. If they want to live in a studio, they'll stay at the Four Seasons. Just pay for a hotel room. So that's the reaction to this that you don't hear from people. Not doing anything on price, huge deficits on the sales volume for PTT collected, and then tens of millions of dollars lost into the economy. So, as I've been talking about for the last year now, wait until this comes to roost here. It takes time for all this to trickle through the economy. But next year, you're going to see a huge shortfall in what they were expecting to take in the PTT. They're spending like a drunken sailor. They're raising payroll taxes and all the raising minimum wage and all the expenses that businesses have to go through. So businesses eventually say enough is enough. I'm not going to expand, or I'm going to cut down on the staff I've got. So what's good of all these benefits they're giving you if you don't have a job? And they're taking tens of millions of dollars out of the economy, which you're going to start to find out next year. It's not doing much. And you're welcome to comment on my blog here. Tell me, am I missing something here? How is this working? Not to mention the fact that the empty homes tax money they brought in, as I talked about, was about $75 to $80 million last year net for the BC spec tax. The empty homes tax is abysmal. $15, $18 million. It's not moving the needle. Yet you're having the higher end people, which nobody can afford to buy into the luxury condos anyways, they're going to sell it to somebody, move, and there's 50, 60, 70,000 in annual lost money that goes into the economy every year. This will have an effect, as you'll see. It takes time to run through the economy, but I think you'll see this down the road. To summarize, again, prices for the condos are barely been scathed for the studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. Have a look at the MLS. Inventory is not there either. People are holding tight to those units. The only thing that's been affected here is the luxury end of the market, which makes up a very small percentage of the market and is not going to do anything to help first-time home buyers. PTT revenue is going to be dropping by 30%, or more, which runs this province. We need that money to keep these social programs. And I saw today in the paper, we're pumping $1 million a day into the downtown Eastside. Can you believe that? $1 million a day is going into the downtown Eastside, into that black hole. It's not making anything better down there. $360 million a year or more is going into that, and they want to increase that, build some more social housing. On that note, I'm going to finish it off here. I've got news for the mayor of Vancouver here and John Horgan. You can pump all the money and build all the social housing you want into that downtown Eastside, and it's not going to make a dent, because just like in the United States, everything is tilted to the West Coast. This is the promised land. You're never going to be able to keep up with the demand. We've got people moving here from Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba. If you're homeless, this is where you're heading. You're on a freight train right now. This is the land of plenty out here. You can sleep outside, mild winters, free needles. So you can keep pumping as much money as you want in there. You're never going to keep pace with the new people coming in. We're making it maybe a little too accommodating. So we'll see where this goes in the future. But again, I think people are fooling themselves if you think the NDP is doing anything with this BC spec tax, the spending, slowing the real estate market, not touching sales. So they're not doing anything here. We'll see where it goes. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, if you're not following me, subscribing to my YouTube channel, please do. You can follow me on Twitter as well. I'll see you next week.